You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments. If this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show.
Today, our guest is Christy Pretzinger. While Christy is the founder and owner of WG Content, her passion is creating environments where people can thrive. Back when she started building the business, she told her accountant that if she couldn't build a business based on kindness, she would go back to a freelance writer. It was only in hindsight that she realized how foundational that intention had been. Christy is also the author of the book, Your Cultural Balance Sheet: Keys to Creating an Environment Where People Can Thrive. Today, we're going to talk about how kindness can empower organizations and how to create a culture to embrace it. Let's jump in. Christy, I'm so excited that you are here today. We had a great conversation before we decided to record, and you really live, eat, and breathe kindness and that part of being your life. And what I'd love to start off with for our listeners is why kindness is a driver for you and how that kind of occurred and became so important to you.
I reflected on this and I was thinking about, someone asked me if I'd worked for unkind people, and I had to think about it. And I was like, no, actually I did not. But I worked within structures that did not foster kindness. So it was interesting when I was first asked that question, it was kind of a little epiphany, because it made me realize why our organization is structured the way that it is, and the processes and procedures and things that we have are all really meant to foster an environment where people can thrive, which is really an element of kindness, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'd love for you to go deeper. So when you say it wasn't set up for kindness, like what's an example of what isn't kindness and what people should think about, like what leaders should think about when they're structuring an environment for kindness?
You know, I had someone tell me once about a place where they had worked, and it wasn't a large corporation. It was a smaller business. And they had a policy that all of the people had to track 40 hours of time a week, which that's not unusual in a time and materials business. It wasn't necessarily billable, they just had to track that time. But then if someone was tracking 40 hours a week, then that employee and her or his manager, we'd call it HR, requested a meeting with them to see how they could do better, because they couldn't put them on a PIP or anything because they were actually working 40 hours a week. But it was explicitly there, or I guess implicitly there, that they wanted them to work more. And, I'm sure nobody liked that meeting. I doubt that the HR person liked it. I am certain the employee did not like it. And I doubt that the manager enjoyed it. And so that's something that's just, it's not kind. And it's really counterintuitive to producing an environment where people want to be, where they're going to be dedicated and committed.
Yeah, I really love that. And it's a great example of something that's really so simple, but a lot of people overlook it. So what are some things that leaders can do to ensure that they build an environment for kindness?
Well, I think you have to have both intention and attention towards that, towards whatever your values are. Ours happen to be, we are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. So they're all built in to the business. So I think the first step is to make sure that you have clear, memorable values. And we did that as a team many, many years ago. And also make sure that your values don't change, that the expression of them may change, but the values don't. And one of the things that I find about the kindness piece of it is really giving people an opportunity to recognize one another for living out our values. And we do that in a pretty structured way. We have a monthly all hands meeting. And prior to that meeting, our HR coordinator asks everyone he says, like, for example, let's say that this month the value is empowered. So she asks employees to recognize other employees who have demonstrated empowerment. And so then she reads all of those off, and someone is, they get a woohoo cup. That's what it used to be. They get a gift card now. But she then takes a name out of a hat, and whoever's name comes out is the one that actually wins the award. So what happens is that gives you a couple things. Number one, it keeps your values top of mind. And number two, it gives your employees an active opportunity to be kind by recognizing another employee. And then it also works with our mission of building relationships one word at a time. So that's a way, really having those kind of values and a mission that really you can live and breathe and feel it, and figure out a way to set up structures and processes that reinforce those values and your mission.
Yeah, I really like that. And what I love about that is it's not just words on a wall. You're now living those values, making it part of it, and building in that kindness throughout that. So I really like that, because you said something to me before, and you said it's about paying attention to your intention. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that for our listeners.
Well, I think you have to have both. You have to have an intention, but if you don't pay any attention to your intention, it kind of is forgotten, right? So if you have an intention to be kind and then you just forget about it and just, go about your day, and it isn't something, it's something that you really want to work on, but you don't pay attention to it, then chances are good you're not going to become kinder, right? I think that I talk frequently about trust being a long game, that with your employees as a leader, they don't know whether or not they believe you. People are jaded, right? So if they join your organization and you say things like, you have unlimited PTO, which we do, and, you can work your own time, whatever you want to do, things like that. They don't really believe that it's that good until they experience it. And so as a leader, trust is a long game. And the important thing to remember there also is that it can be blown in a moment, right? It takes a long time to build it, and you can blow it very, very easily. So again, paying attention to your own behaviors is very important when it comes to building trust, to building an environment that people are dedicated and committed to.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, you think about, as a leader, you are always being watched, whether you know it or not. So you're right. It is about every movement, every word, what you're saying and doing. People are watching your actions. And even to the point that, like, if you see a leader walking through a large room or an open area and there is something on the floor, I've seen leaders stop and pick up that item off the floor and throw it away. And I've seen other leaders walk right by. And let me tell you, there's a difference in how you look at those people and how you believe them when they're speaking and stuff. So even those small little acts make big pieces of it too. So it's really important. Yeah. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about trust being the long game. And so I hear you. You're right. You can lose it in a moment. But what are some actions that leaders can do to help continually build on that trust?
One of the things that I consciously do, first of all, I do use the word love about my employees, because one definition of love is wishing the well-being for others. And so I genuinely wish the well-being of everyone who works with us. So one of the things that I do to demonstrate kindness, but to also establish trust, which is the relationship, right? Everything comes down to relationships. Is I'm always looking for ways, I'm always keeping my eye on the culture, making sure that there remains some joy in the work that people are doing, even though sometimes it's hard. And one of the things that I recently started, and it's probably been 6 months ago now, that I asked people to, in the interest of protecting their attention span. We live in a digital world. Everybody's got a device. We're going to have to live with that. But we have to learn to manage those devices. And so I suggest, and it's not like there's no whip cracking here, but I suggest that everyone, no matter what time they start working, that after 50 minutes, they take a 10-minute break from all of their devices. So we all work virtually. So throw in a load of wash, take your dog for a walk, do some stretching, whatever you want to do. Just get away from your devices for 10 minutes. Because not only does that help protect their attention span, but it's also where innovation and creativity thrive, right? In the gaps. So by instituting something like that demonstrates that I care about these people and I care about their well-being, which then builds trust.
Yeah, Yeah, I love that. And I actually start all my meetings 5 minutes after the hour because you say you're going to end 5 minutes before and it never ends early. So I always start late. And I've had so many people that have appreciated that mental transition time, whether it's physical or mental, depending on if you're in the office or if you're remote. So I totally agree with you. And the other thing that you said about loving your team members, that's actually one of my leadership core principles, which is love your team members. And because I agree with you, if you think about the people in your life that, whether it's personal, professional, but usually personal, family members, children, spouses, partners, and because you love them, you will do anything for them, right? And if you take that to your actual team, and if you love your team and actually take care of them and do what you would do for someone that is very, very close to you personally, you can empower them and level them up their leadership. It's just so powerful when you truly care about someone. So I love that you bring that up. It's so, so important.
Yes, it is important. I agree with you. And, it's interesting because there's something in the zeitgeist right now that at least is coming across, my email basically. And there's a lot of conversation around this kind of thing, around the fact that, that employees don't feel that their leaders demonstrate the values of the organization, if they even know what those values are. And sometimes the values are so, long-winded and like they're not snappy, they're not easy to remember. So people might not even know what those values are. And then there's a big conversation that I just was reading about that, gone are the days of the Jack Welch and Lee Iacocca type of leadership. And so there's a lot of people and a lot of men that do not know how to demonstrate vulnerability because they've been taught in our society that vulnerability is weakness. And so, and they're like, well, what is kind weak? All of those kind of things, the things that the soft skills that I think really are the hard skills, right? The things like, accounting and, bookkeeping and, that kind of stuff are the things that I think actually are the easier skills. You can go to school and learn them. The soft skills kind of come from your own willingness to inquire about your own behavior. I think it all starts with self-awareness there, and then learning those skills. And the more that you learn about yourself, the easier it is for you to feel comfortable demonstrating things like kindness and vulnerability and empathy and things of that nature.
Yeah, all under the emotional intelligence piece and the willingness. The openness is obviously the first and foremost piece there. So I love that you bring that up. You said a key piece there about kindness is not weakness. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit more. And what have you found, either with yourself or with your organization or with other leaders, on how do they differentiate that so they can start building in kindness?
Well, I think that it's just a mistake to think of kindness as weakness, because like boundaries are kind. Clarity is kind. Brevity can frequently be kind. So there's a lot of things about your leadership style, that ensuring that everyone hears the same message is kind, so that you don't start something, inadvertently start something as a leader. And I think when it comes to things like clarity, especially as the leader, I've been very cautious about this over the years, ever since I learned about this many years ago, that people, because of my position as the owner of the business, if I'm just kind of thinking about something and I talk about it, if I don't say very clearly, I'm just spitballing here, you do not need to do anything with this, I could end up with a very long, in-depth report that somebody spent a whole bunch of time on. And I really was just kind of curious and musing about something. So again, being very clear in that way is also kind, right? Is being clear about your expectations and those kinds of things. So there's an awful lot of things that if you look at it through the lens of kindness, it makes a lot of sense. I think people just don't often link things like boundaries and clarity and brevity to kindness.
Yeah, and I actually was just going to bring that up because I feel like a lot of the examples that you're bringing up, communication, vulnerability, are there other words that maybe some leaders may know that you are translating as part of kindness as well that they could think of?
I don't know if I would say just specific words. I think it's more about deeds, more about the things that we actually do. that demonstrate kindness. So for example, we don't have a formal review process. Every 6 months, we do something called the best of me, or it might be called the best of us. And it's a 4-quadrant piece of paper divided into 4 pieces. And it says in the upper left-hand corner, it says you get the best of me when. The right-hand corner says you get the worst of me when. The lower left says you can count on me too. And, fill in, count on me to do something. And then the lower right says what I need from you is. What I think is really important, and I tell all the leaders who perform these, that lower right-hand quadrant is the only one that's their responsibility. Other than that, they're there to listen. 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them accordingly, right? And so, with that one, if someone tells you what they need from you, and it's reasonable, then and you don't do it, that's how you can blow trust immediately. You can destroy a relationship by doing something like that. So if someone says to you, I really need you to hold me to account for XYZ, or, I need you to loop me in on something more, whatever it happens to be, you really need to make an effort to do that. And that, again, is kind. And even the way that we do our review process is kind. There's a lot of places that have, that give people total compensation, a sheet that shows total comp. My experience of that frequently, the driver for that is people hear mumblings about people feeling like they're not being compensated very well. It's almost like I'll show you what you actually cost me. Ours is not like that. Actually, the sheet is called the You Matter sheet. So the headline is You Matter, and then we have a beautiful paragraph because we're writers. One of our writers wrote it, basically saying essentially that your worth is immeasurable. But, we appreciate that you put your talents and gifts to work for this organization. Here's what we can, give to you in return. And then we just do the total comp like anybody else would. But the first time people get that, if they're a new employee, they're blown away by the fact that we're pointing out that you actually matter. And yes, there is a financial piece to it. That's how we can demonstrate this, but you actually matter. Your hopes, your dreams, your fears, all the things that you want in your life matter to us.
I love that. So let's take you. It sounds like you've built a great culture and environment for all your team members to thrive. And so if I'm a leader in an organization that maybe is the complete opposite of this, where they don't have these type of processes in place, or even, being vulnerable and being transparent is like a no in their culture for various reasons, what would you tell leaders to do to try to start building in that kindness with themselves and within their organization?
Yeah, I talk a lot about this, especially working, because I'm in a different seat here. I mean, I'm the CEO of my own organization, so I get to set that. Most people don't get to set the tone. And so we talk a lot about the fact that you can learn when you lead, you can do whatever it is you're doing out and down. So you can be vulnerable out and down, but you may not be able to be vulnerable up. You have to have discernment about the safety of that. Some organizations don't have psychological safety, which is a massive mistake. But if you don't, you don't. But if the leader, even if you only have a few people reporting to you, you can create psychological safety amongst your team as the leader. And you can demonstrate vulnerability down to your team, which then encourages them to be vulnerable back to you. And when you are vulnerable with someone, even just a little bit, it's not like you have to open your kimono, but you just maybe self-deprecating or something, people like you a little more, and then they feel comfortable being vulnerable with you. So I think that's an important thing to think about.
I love that. I love how you separate the 3 levels of the out and down and work on that first to start changing that culture and getting people to see who you really are. And, hopefully you can eventually get to the up part of it too.
He also told me, play the game so you can rise through the ranks. And so it's basically play the game until you can change the rules.
I love it.
I thought that was pretty good, to just I changed the rules because I left. It was like, I didn't like the corporate America. I didn't understand politics and I didn't want them. And so I just exited the building, and started my own thing. But I know that is not what most people want to do. So learning how to manage that in a large organization, I acknowledge it can be very challenging, especially if you're the leader and there's like bad things going on that you're hearing about and you don't want to share those with your people. It's a burden that you carry as a leader. And it's it's why you make the bigger bucks usually, somewhat, at least let's hope. And then understanding, as you said earlier, that someone is always watching you, even if it's your family. Somebody is watching you, watching your behavior.
So you kind of talked a lot about like bringing that kindness into the culture. You have a book about your cultural balance sheet. So I'd love for you to talk about what that is and how leaders can leverage that with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, the book is called Your Cultural Balance Sheet: Keys to Creating an Environment Where People Can Thrive. And we did it in kind of short nuggets so that you can kind of pick it up and look at any key that you want. It doesn't have to be, read from start to finish. But basically, it follows the analogy of a balance sheet. So just like a balance sheet, you have assets, liabilities, and equity. And in this case, like the cultural assets would obviously be your people is one big thing. There's a lot of other things we talk about as cultural assets. And then the interesting thing that I discovered as I was kind of exploring this whole idea was that with cultural liabilities, the interesting thing is that if you focus your attention, if you have an intention to look at those liabilities and then you pay attention to how to correct those liabilities, they can often move into the asset side. I use the example of rigidity a lot. Like, for example, if you catch yourself or someone else on your team saying that's how we've always done it, and that's kind of a ding, 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 ding. We might be being a little inflexible here. And so if you actually pay attention to that, then you can turn that into a reasonable amount of flexibility, which becomes, moves over to the asset side. And then unlike a financial balance sheet, in this case, the cultural equity is the culture itself that you build by focusing attention on your assets and your liabilities. And the result is like that circle of safety. That's a Simon Sinek term. But I've always talked about that is that he says, if you take care of we, me is included in that we. So instead of putting yourself first, if it's just me, nobody else is included. But if it's we collectively, then you include yourself.
I love that. I love the whole asset and liability idea and thinking about it. So even if, everyone if you've had any business classes, you've taken something to understand asset and liabilities, even if you aren't a finance person or accounting or whatever. And it's a really unique way to look at, it's kind of like putting it into the bucket. Most people know, right? I'm putting it into the bucket, and then if I empty the bucket. So I love the way that you're thinking about that for sure.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting analogy. It came up in a dinner conversation one night with some friends who are also business owners, and several of them have had successful exits. So they were talking about, EBITDA, and they were talking about multiples and all that kind of thing. And as I often do, I kind of muse and I don't know what I think until I say it. And I said, of course I look at my financials, at my balance sheet, but it's almost like I look at my business through the lens of a cultural balance sheet. And one of my friends looked at me and he goes, well, there's your book. And I was like,
yep.
I have to do
it. And that's how it happens. That's right. That's great. That's great. All right. There's that sound. It's time for our fun questions. Are you ready for our fun questions?
Sure.
All right. So let's see. Would you rather have the ability to teleport anywhere instantly or be able to speak every language fluently?
Oh, I'd want to speak every language fluently.
All right. Why? Like, what would you do with that?
Well, I studied French when I was in college, so I really enjoy that. And then when I've traveled, I kind of have an ear for languages anyway. Not that I can perfectly understand them, but German is very similar to English. And when I was in, where was I? I don't know, somewhere over there. Austria. I think I was in Austria, and I was there for work. This was many, many years ago. And the people that I was in a travel business kind of situation, and these guides were there, and they were Austrian, and they started speaking German, and they said something, and I laughed, and then they said again in German, "Be careful, she speaks German." Like they were going to and I said, "No, actually, I don't speak German," which was kind of interesting. So I think it'd be fun to be able to go anywhere in the world and speak that language and understand people. I think there's a beauty to being able to communicate in the language of the land that you're visiting.
I love that. Totally agree. All right. Do you want to live in a world without social media or a world without smartphones?
without social media. You kidding me? Somebody needs to shut that down. I mean, someone needs to shut it down, man. We are in trouble. We are in big trouble. Yeah.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah,
definitely too many people get sucked into it. And unfortunately, there's some good in it, but there's unfortunately a lot of bad too, in my opinion. I agree.
Yeah.
All right, last one.
How did I ever navigate an unknown city without my maps? I mean, I don't know what I used to carry a map around, and like read a map of this. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, last one. Do you want to live in a house with an incredible view or a house with the most comfortable interior?
Well, I'm very lucky. I have both. I have a view of the Ohio River. So I live in Cincinnati, and I have a very cozy living area. And we always joke about, we call it the nest, and we kind of fight over it. It's a sectional with that section, the corner section is really cool. So I am a creature of comfort. So I probably would go more for that if I had to choose an either or.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, Christy, thank you so much. I love the whole kindness idea. I love the way that you've transformed how you think about kindness, and that it's not weakness, and that it's really transparency, communication, just considering the experience of the individual and caring for them. So many great little nuggets. And the book is a great idea to be able to follow that with the assets and liabilities. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Stacey. I enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time,
this is Stacey Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.